Hi, and welcome to Say Grace, Food for Thought and Hospitality. I'm Steve Palmer, and I invite you to join me as we explore the stories behind leaders in the hospitality industry and beyond. Say Grace is a place to reflect, connect, and savor thoughtful narratives. Everyone has a seat at our table. So pull up a chair and let's discover the transformative power of hospitality together. I have so much to talk to you about. Hey there, and welcome to Say Grace, where we unpack the stories of hospitality. So pull up a chair, because everybody's welcome at our table. And today we are welcoming a big deal, because you are a big deal, Chef Vivian Howard. Welcome, Vivian.
Thank you.
Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
I feel like, I want to just start the show with this. I feel like our relationship is me asking you for things, cook at the Feed the Need, come to Skyline Lodge. If you ever need, like, I'll come wash dishes. Like,
yeah, sure.
No, I mean, like, I was thinking about that on the drive over here. I'm like, most of the time I reach out to Vivian, it's, hey, will you do something? So.
Well, it's my pleasure to say yes. I've always had a hard time asking for things.
Okay. Me too, although you wouldn't know that by heart.
Well, you're asking on behalf of something else.
Yes.
Usually when I ask, I'm asking for myself, like, can you get me a reservation?
Gotcha. Okay. All right. Okay. So I'm supposed to read your bio now.
Oh,
so I will do, I'll do that. Based in her home state of North Carolina, Vivian's culinary expertise stretches across multiple mediums. A celebrated chef, cookbook author, television personality, restaurateur, Vivian's career is deeply rooted in her personal experiences from Southern upbringing. An author of 2 books, her first Deep Run Roots, Stories and Recipes from My Corner of the South, is a New York Times-bestseller and was named Cookbook of the Year by International Association of Culinary Professionals. Vivian is also the creator and host of television shows Somewhere South and A Chef's Life, for which she has won a Peabody, an Emmy, and a James Beard Award. Vivian's culinary expertise is on full display at her restaurants at Lenoir, Hot and Handy, both in Charleston, Chef and the Farmer in Kinston, and this summer, Vivian will open Theodosia at the Sanderling Resort in Duck, North Carolina. I always like reading people's bios. It's very impressive. You're like a big deal. And I know so many people that watch your shows and are huge. You're interviewing Vivian Howard. I'm like, yeah, you're kind of a big deal.
Well, if people watch The Chef's Life, they really know me. They feel like they're connected to me, like a family member. But, there's no in-between Vivian Howard fans. You either don't care at all or don't know, or you're kind of borderline scary obsessed.
Okay, fair. So you grew up in Deep Run, North Carolina. We were just talking about a farming community. How did you find your way to cooking?
I grew up in Deep Run. I'm the youngest of 4 girls. I was an accident.
A surprise baby.
A surprise baby.
Yeah.
Yes. And I always wanted to leave. I always wanted to be like an entertainer or a storyteller, a writer. I got a lot of attention as a kid. From whenever I would get in trouble or something would go wrong, I would write my own account of what happened. And then like throw it on the kitchen table and leave the house and then come back and everyone's mood would have shifted. So storytelling was always a power move for me. And so I ended up going to boarding school and then moved to New York with the dream of being a writer. I wanted to be Katie Couric, to be honest.
Okay.
Yeah.
I get that. I had a big crush on Katie Couric at one point.
She was a huge deal.
America's sweetheart,
morning shows are always like a comfort to me.
Yeah.
And so I moved to New York to do that. I had an internship during college at CBS Sunday Morning. So I had some real fuel to think that I could do this.
Sure.
But what happened was I ended up working in restaurants, which is what a lot of people with dreams to be an artist end up doing. I worked in restaurants as a college student, as a server, and I started as a server and in New York. And it just so happened that the restaurant was just opening, and it was called Voyage, and the concept of the restaurant was Southern food via Africa. And this was in 2001. And no one was talking about this at the time.
Sure.
And I came from the South, and I didn't even realize that Southern food was a thing. I was embarrassed by everything that I grew up around.
In New York, I can see that.
I had changed my accent to the point that when I was waiting tables, people asked me if I was from New Zealand. Because I thought that I was sounding like a New Yorker.
Right. I love that.
And so, this was like when Anthony Bourdain was coming around. And so I thought, okay, maybe if I start working in the kitchen, I can translate that experience into a career as a food writer. So I started working in the kitchen at this restaurant before my shift on the floor. And
wow.
So that's how, and I found that I really loved working in the kitchen. I was good at it. In many ways, I appreciated not having to perform. And I liked the camaraderie of it. I liked being on a team. I'd never played team sports. And so it was the first time I'd ever worked toward a goal, toward success with other people.
Right.
So that's how I got into cooking. And I just kept cooking because it was a lot easier to get a job cooking than writing. And
you chose, based on our current media landscape, you chose the right path.
Then I think, I've always been a bad employee and really motivated, like self-motivated. So eventually, while working in restaurants in New York, I started a little side hustle, a soup business, where I would send out an email to everybody I knew on Sundays saying, these are the soups I'm making this week, place your orders. And this is way before anybody did anything like this.
See, I had no idea.
And it was called Soups On. I've never been good at naming things either.
That's the worst. Naming a restaurant is one of the worst things.
But so then I would go around on my day off from working in a kitchen and deliver my soups. It was every Wednesday, and that was my day off. And that was the day that the food section of the New York Times came out. So my boyfriend would drive, and I would read the food section of the New York Times out loud to him and get out and deliver the soup everywhere around the city. And that got like some traction. I had some famous clients, I guess, and one of their assistants wanted to write about it in Time Out New York, but I couldn't allow them to do that because I was making the soup in my apartment.
Right.
And chilling it down in my bathtub. And and so then, that created this environment where Ben and I were going to stay in New York and open a real restaurant. And my family caught wind of that and said, please don't do that. Please, you can open a restaurant anywhere in North Carolina. We'll help you do it.
Okay.
And so we decided to move back to North Carolina to figure out where that restaurant was going to be. And it became clear that it could be anywhere inside this 10,000 square foot building that my family had already purchased in downtown Kinston.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay. Anywhere in the world, right here.
Right here.
Yeah.
Yeah. And if it tells you anything about the economic status of Kinston at the time, the building was $75,000.
Wow.
Yeah. So, yeah.
Wow. And that's where Chef and the Farmer was born. Mm-hmm. And what was Kinston probably wasn't known for its food scene at that moment in time. What was the reception initially? Because now people drive from here to have dinner there.
Yeah, we were busy from the beginning. I always, we opened in 2007.
Okay.
And we were busy. It took us about a year to get it open. And so during that time, rumors started going, like this couple from New York has come here and they think they're going to open this restaurant. And so everybody was talking. So people showed up from the very beginning, I always say, to see what crazy looked like. And, we were, even though it was in this economically depressed town, what we really had going for us was that we were the only people trying to do something exceptional in the whole Eastern North Carolina region.
Right.
So we were the special occasion spot. And, when the economy tanked in 2008, we were still busy because people still had anniversaries and
Right.
graduations and all of that. So I think we really benefited from being this outlier, this like unicorn in this place that no one expected it. People would say, you got to go see this restaurant in Kinston. And
They still say that.
Yeah, it's just like you don't kind of expect it.
Yeah, yeah. Wow. And how was that for you? Because you've gone from delivering soup to owning your own restaurant. Was that scary, you opening your first place? Were you?
I was not scared at all. I was so arrogant and
so
naive at the
jealous.
same time.
I'm so jealous.
I really thought that I had gone to New York and learned how to do things the right way, and that I was going to be teaching everybody in Eastern North Carolina how to eat and drink and sit in a chair.
Okay. Love that.
And naivete is really powerful.
It is.
I had no idea what I was getting myself into. I think also isolation is really powerful. Ben and I didn't have a social life. We didn't have children at the time, so we just put all of our energy into the restaurant and really, kept our heads down. And it was exciting too.
Right, sure.
Because we were busy from the beginning and people were enthusiastic about it.
Right.
It was, there were several factors like being in the middle of nowhere and being socially isolated, I think really added to our success or made it possible.
Right, okay. Yeah, I was freaked out when I opened completely. You're an idiot. What are you doing? So I'm glad to hear that you did not. I still go through that, but wow, that's awesome.
I don't know. I think it's a
imposter
character
syndrome,
flaw
yeah.
and I have lots of imposter syndrome.
Okay.
Lots of that, but.
Because I feel like that's a common thread with entrepreneurs. There's a little bit of like, do I deserve to be at this table?
Yeah, I've always felt that way as a chef. Kind of like I'm fooling people
right.
into making them think that I can cook. And I've always had that imposter syndrome. The only time I've never had imposter syndrome is when I was writing my cookbooks.
Okay.
And that's the only time I really felt like, I know this is good. I know this is good. And if other people don't get it, then there's something wrong with them. And that's the only time I've ever felt that way in my life, and I keep trying to find that feeling again.
Right. I'm envious. And so how did that sort of translate into a chef's life?
Well, I don't give up on things easily, and I told you I always wanted to be a storyteller.
Yeah.
And we had been running Chef and the Farmer for about 5 years.
Okay.
And this is actually interesting. I don't know that I've ever told this story before because it's a little strange, but Ben and I went on a vacation to Argentina and Uruguay in 2010. New Year's, after New Year's. There's that week after New Year's in a restaurant where things are dead. So we would often take that week off. So we went to Uruguay and we stayed at Francis Mallman's place in Garzon. And it's a tiny place. There's only like 12 rooms. And my mother-in-law had told them that I was a chef in the United States. And I was young and, I was cute or whatever. And so the people at this resort like jumped several steps in front of me being a chef and assumed that I was like Rachel Ray.
Right.
And so they're like, you're a TV chef, you're a TV chef. And that planted in my mind this idea that maybe I could go back to this thought of storytelling around food. And so after that trip, I went home and I was like, okay, I am in Eastern North Carolina, the last place that I thought that I could ever do something like this. But I have learned that the food that I'm cooking is rife with stories, rife with history. It's so interesting. maybe I can do some storytelling around that. So I started writing these blogs about making collard kraut with my neighbors and putting up tomatoes and that kind of thing. And then I got really obsessed with the idea of making a documentary out of that. And so I reached out to the sister of one of my childhood friends who also grew up in Deep Run and had become a filmmaker. And she had made this documentary about, it was called Tobacco Money Feeds My Family. And it was about the tobacco industry in Eastern North Carolina, which her parents were in tobacco, my parents were in tobacco. And so I asked her if she would help me make this documentary about the dying food traditions of Eastern North Carolina. And she was like, sure, we can experiment. And so she and her partner came down July 4th weekend, and I had just given birth to I gave birth in April, and this was in July. I was still breastfeeding, still wearing maternity clothes. And we went out to experiment around making this documentary, and the subject was going to be putting up corn. So I didn't think that I was going to be in it. I thought I was going to be like the director and she was like, you got to get in front of the camera and do the putting up the corn and everything. And so my family and I put up corn, and throughout the course of the day, I just kept talking to her, and she was behind the camera. And I think she really knew from the beginning what we were doing, and I really didn't. But that's how it all came to be. So we made this little sizzle reel, is what we called it. Yeah. And it was around putting up corn. And we sent that to the Food Network, and they laughed at us. They were like, what is this? It looks like a home video. Right. And then we sent it to UNC-TV, which is the North Carolina Public Television. They also said, we don't know what this is. You need to decide if it's a documentary or a cooking show. It can't be both. And then Cynthia, the director, was like, I'm gonna try one more thing. And she had this contact at South Carolina Television, SCTV, Amy Shoemaker. She sent it to Amy, and Amy was like, well, I don't know what this is, but I like it.
That's all you need.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we thought we had won an Oscar. Right. And so she sent it to National PBS, and National PBS said, this is really interesting, but you need to make 13 of them. They need to be 24 minutes long, and then we'll consider distributing it. And so, with no, you have to raise all the money to make everything on PBS. Right. So we set out to try and do that. We fell dramatically short. We had a budget of $1 million for the first season, and I think we ended up raising about $300,000. And part 80 of that was on an Indiegogo campaign where I just went on there and promised all these things to people. But everybody from the beginning working on the series, everybody working on it felt like it was special and that it was gonna matter in some way. And so we just kept doing it. And almost no one got paid that first season. But that first season is when we won the Peabody, right? Which is a very rare thing.
No one since Julia Child.
Yeah, in the cooking space. Yeah,
I mean, to do. That's not a very rare thing. That's an incredible thing.
Yeah, and it's really was the impetus for us to be able to go on and fundraise and make the rest of the seasons.
That's awesome. I've read that you don't like looking at pictures of yourself.
No.
And we have that in common. hate my picture being, that's a bit of a disconnect from being on TV.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because after we shot that first little putting up corn situation, Cynthia sent me the footage, and I'm like, yeah, I'll look at it. And then a week goes by and I haven't looked at it, and then another week and I haven't looked at it. And she's like, look, you're gonna have to look at this. Right. And I was like, I just can't stand it. I can't stand it. And so I did watch the first, I did look at that footage, and I was like, okay, this is what I look like. This is really what I look like from all angles. Right. And so then watching it became kind of an out-of-body experience. I actually, after that the first season, I really didn't think anybody was gonna see the show. Right. So I just, I dressed myself I didn't put on makeup. I wore my hair in a bun, and, I wore maternity clothes and whatever. And then that first season, people watched it, and I was like, oh my God, I'm out in the world looking like that. I need hair and makeup for second season. So I got hair and makeup for the first episode of the second season. And after that, I was like, I can't stand this. I don't look like myself.
Right.
I don't look like myself. And I don't think that's what I think people like the fact that I look like hell. And so it was kind of like
you were the beginning of authenticity in our media.
I guess.
That's such a buzzword now, but I mean, that's really what you're talking about.
Yeah, but I still don't think people would really allow themselves to look the way that I do on camera. But
it worked though, Vivian. I mean.
Yeah, it did. It did. But to that end, I don't watch the shows unless I have to.
I'll get clips from this conversation and what do you think? And I'm like, God, I'm the same way. I do not like looking.
I'll say that, like, before I started making the show, I had never looked at myself from behind. In a mirror, I was like, okay, this is all I need to see is the front part. I'm fine with it.
Right.
But on the show, I really had to see myself from behind and below, from the side. I mean, it's like, really was hard. But, it's like, what do they say? Like, it's worse not knowing.
Yeah. I'm somebody that definitely, when I feel like I don't know, I'd rather have the ugly truth than feel like I don't know what's going on.
Yeah, and for me, that was my butt from below.
I love that. What was the most rewarding thing about doing the show? Was it things you learned about yourself? What was the thing?
I would say the impact that the show had on other people.
Okay.
I'll never forget, making the show. I have a hard time talking about the show because oftentimes it can seem as if I'm not grateful for the experience or the journey or all the, everything that it gave to my life. But it was very challenging to, carry on your work in a restaurant, mic'd all the time. We were actually serving guests. We didn't stage anything. I cooked the Tabasco luncheon at SFA symposium with a mic and cameras. I mean, it was so hard to do that.
Right.
And so over every season, I would be like, okay, hopefully I've earned the credibility to do something else in this space, in this media space after this season. But then I would have these experiences like this woman coming into the restaurant and saying that her mom had just died of Alzheimer's, and for the last year and a half, she didn't remember anything. But every time she would visit her mom would say, I want to watch that show where that woman cooks chicken and rice with her mom and feeds it to her children. And she said her mom would say that every time she went. And that is powerful.
Yeah.
And the way that the show gave people pride in where they came from, and the way that they grew up, and the way that we were able to exalt very simple, humble things that people are not traditionally proud of.
Right.
That was really profound, and obviously continues to affect me.
Yeah. The power of hospitality. I talk a lot about the transformation when people receive hospitality, how it changes them. And that to me is cooking with your mom, feeding your daughter, that's hospitality.
Yeah, and I think, we all just want to be seen.
Yes.
And I think in many ways, a chef's life allowed a lot of people to be seen. And I think in, a restaurant setting and a hospitality setting, sometimes you can really make people feel seen and welcomed in a way that maybe they don't feel throughout their day.
Right. We have an opportunity to create a sense of well-being that I love. I cherish that moment when you see it on other people, because I know what it's like to receive it. I'm sure you do too, And I always talk about the fact that there's something deeper going on than just serving food. You know, we're connecting with people, childhood memories, nostalgia of a dish. Somebody's had a really bad day and they come in and feel cared for. And just that simple, kind gesture can be completely altering for them.
Yeah, and it's interesting how, you know, you can be on one side of it, you know, giving the hospitality. So yesterday I was in the restaurant and, you know, giving and feeling, you know, by the end of it, like pretty washed.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, what do I want to do? I want to go
Receive.
Yes.
And you want to be taken care of.
Yeah, and it's wild that it can actually work.
Yes.
How you can leave, you can go from being the person giving and feeling so void of that, you know, by the end of it, and then sit down in the chair in a restaurant and so easily receive.
Yeah, it's beautiful. That's why I love our business so much. Since you've opened your first restaurant, a lot has changed in our world. Pandemics. You've written about it, about going to a fast casual model. How do you think the industry has changed from when Chef and the Farmer first opened to now?
Oh my gosh. I mean, I don't know that I can even put that into words. You know, Chef and the Farmer opening in 2007, you know, that was kind of the very beginning of the farm to table movement.
It was,
you know, if I could have flashed forward 6 years, I would have never named Chef and the Farmer because it became so cliche.
Yeah.
But I think that 2005, 6, 7 really marked a increased interest in dining out and hospitality and chefs and an interest in our craft.
Right.
And I think that we have experienced the whole roller coaster of that, from, you know, chefs as rock stars to chefs as embittered, you know, yellers to, you know, I think that the last 15 years has been a roller coaster in many aspects of our culture, and restaurants have just kind of been the reflection of that.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know anyone that I ever worked for in restaurants prior to owning my own that would have said it was easy. But I feel like everybody kind of feels like it's harder now.
Oh, yeah. What's your hope for hospitality?
I hope that restaurants can continue to be a place where people go to seek hospitality. I hope that we can continue to provide it. I hope people continue to be open to it. In many ways, the last 15 years, you know, it's hard saying this in front of you, who's scaled tremendously. But, you know, my experience is kind of that, you know, restaurants are meant to support the people that work in them. At the end of the day, there's not like a whole lot left after that if you're doing exactly what you should for your staff and your guests. Like, if there's a lot left after that, then somebody's getting shortchanged. So, you know, my vision for hospitality would be more of that.
Okay, that's great.
More restaurants that seek to really act as a unit, that support the people that work there, that are extensions of their community. I feel like Chef and the Farmer was like that in the beginning.
Right.
And then, you know, when you see what other people are doing, other people who are successful, it's like, oh, they've got 4 restaurants. I need 4 restaurants. If I'm going to be successful, this is what I need. But then, for me at least, everything gets diluted in the process of that. I certainly get diluted in the process of that. And I'm in a unique position where people really go to my restaurants in part to experience me.
Right.
So, in terms of my own version of hospitality, I'm trying to get closer to that.
That's
you know,
awesome.
like now in Kinston, you know, I shut Chef and the Farmer down completely 2 years ago because I had lost such a connection to the place and the people. and what we were doing. And I've always been that type of chef that, like, if a dish isn't working, if my staff is not able to execute it in the way that I want, rather than fumbling with that dish for months, I'll just remove it and start with something new.
Right.
And that's what I had to do with Chef and the Farmer. It's like, what is not working about this for me? How can I get back? How can I sleep at night?
Right.
How can I go to bed knowing that the people who came to my restaurant to see me got exactly what they wanted? So I resolved that by reopening 3 nights a month. And I do these kitchen bar dinners. I've been doing it for about 1.5 years now. 7-course tasting menus. I seat about 16 people at a time. I talk through the whole meal. I sign books, I take pictures, I give a lot of myself. I go home dead tired,
right.
But I feel really good about it. I feel like every person who comes gets exactly what they signed up for and more. That's
awesome.
And that's like what it feels like, hospitality to me.
Right, yeah, I mean, I love that. I love that there's, Mike Lotta said once, Steven Satterfield said something similar, like, everybody has their own way of viewing this, as long as it's coming from a place. In other words, you may have one restaurant. Steven just opened his second after 15 years. It means something different to everybody, and you really, I think, different than what I do, where there are a lot of other people involved. You really are the center point of why people are coming. I don't think most people know who I am, and that's great.
Keep it that way.
Yeah, no. I mean, and I mean that, I don't mean that like, I never wanted the Indigo Road to be about Steve Palmer. Like, that's not that's just not the way I'm wired. Well, that's cool. Well, so saying that, pivoting to opening another restaurant, Theodosia. So tell us about that.
Yeah, well, Theodosia is a little different. I look at Chef and the Farmer as really an extension of me.
Right,
because
absolutely.
People watch me behind the line there on TV, toiling and cooking.
Right.
And so there, I really feel like I need to give people a piece of me. Theodosia is different in that I don't think the expectation is going to be that everybody sees me there behind the line, toiling and cooking. But I'm trying to be really strategic about the things that I do in my career moving forward. And I only want to do things in places where I want to spend more time, like Charleston, like the Outer Banks.
The Outer Banks is pretty great.
And I really love projects that have a beginning, a middle, and an end.
Okay.
I like preparing, planning, digging in, getting set up, getting started, setting up systems, riding, coasting, working, and then powering down and reflecting on what I've learned, and then getting ready to do it all again. That's one reason I enjoy doing the kitchen bars at Chef and the Farmer, because I get to approach every month a little differently.
Sure.
And I look at Theodosia like that because it's largely seasonal. We'll have every summer to get revved up and excited for. I'll have the whole year to think about seafood and the preparations I want to explore. You have time to address the things that you could improve on.
Right.
And you have time to build enthusiasm for, what you're doing next. I also, Theodosia excites me because I love history. I love storytelling. I love telling other people's stories. I love approaching a restaurant from somewhat of from someone else's perspective. I feel like Chef and the Farmer, Lenoir, Handy and Hot, Deep Run Roots, This Will Make It Taste Good. It's all like Vivian's perspective. Like, what should Vivian cook? What type of food should Vivian cook? So Theodosia allows me to step outside of that and cook the food that the Outer Banks tells me I should cook.
Right.
And approach it from the perspective of myth and legend and folklore and history, and really look at a different region's foodways and adapt them, with a chef's sensibilities.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. How we kind of went out of order chronologically. How's Charleston been for you? I know everybody here loves your restaurant, so.
Well, Charleston, as I said, I'm trying to be strategic about the things I do moving forward, and I want to do things in places that I enjoy. And I love Charleston. Every time I come here, my kids and my family, everybody jokes, I say I'm going to town. We used to, I grew up in Deep Run, and when we would go to town, we went to Kinston. And so now when I go to town, I get to come to Charleston.
Okay.
People often ask me why I would choose to open a restaurant in Charleston, a city that is full of excellent restaurants. And I always say, if given the opportunity to do that, why wouldn't I?
Right.
If we were talking about imposter syndrome, if somebody thinks I can play in the sandbox, I need to prove to myself that I can. So I'm not going to sit here and pretend that it's been easy. Before I opened these restaurants, everybody said, oh, staffing in Charleston is so hard. I'm like, oh, please. I have staff in Kinston. Well, staffing in Charleston is hard.
It's hard. It's hard.
We opened in the middle of the pandemic, which, I don't think we were the only people to open restaurants in the middle of the pandemic, but that's not ideal.
Right.
But it's been a gift for me to have these places and to get to come here and work and be a part of a restaurant community. Where I live, I don't have anyone to talk shop with.
Right,
I
sure.
don't have, I don't go out to a bar and have a glass of wine with another chef, or, it's very, I'm in my own little bubble.
Right.
And so being a part of the Charleston restaurant community has really felt like I'm a part of a community for the first time.
Good.
And, maybe it's because I'm not threatening or whatever, but people have been really nice.
I always say this about Charleston. I came here in '89, so I've been here a long time. As long as you come and you want to be a part of the community, you're going to be welcomed, It's when we've seen a few New York chefs come in with a little too much bravado, and I'm going to open a 14,000 square foot restaurant. Really? Why? Because no one opens a 14,000.
Right, because all of Charleston can fit inside of it.
I'm like, our restaurants are like 3,000 square feet. I think Charleston is welcoming as long as you want to be about Charleston, and that's been very abundantly clear. I drive my daughter to school in the morning right by Hot and Handy, and a lot of times I press the hazard light and pop out and grab one, and so I've loved that you're there.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. What do you think the biggest misconception about you is? Externally, you've achieved a lot, right? And I'm not saying internally you haven't achieved, but what do you think people would be surprised to know about the road that you've trudged? I was talking about trudging the road to happy destiny.
That I'm trudging.
You're trudging, okay. All right, fair enough.
I think people, I can't say, I think a lot of what people think about me is accurate. I think a lot of my fans connect to me because there's something that they see that looks desperate. Like I need help.
Okay.
People have always been like, oh, can I help you? I don't know. There's something.
Wounded bird syndrome,
yeah.
or
I think they can see that. I wear my heart on my sleeve. I wear my emotions on my sleeve, and people who are empathetic tend to gravitate toward me for that reason. I think people look at my list of accolades or hear my bio and think that I've got it all figured out sometimes, but you don't arrive at that.
Right.
I think people also, I think there is this perception that I don't like going out in public, or I don't like engaging with people. but this is really the opposite. I think I engage with people at such a deep level and so intense. People receive that, they feel that, but then it's exhausting. Mm-hmm. And I spend a lot of time in quiet. And, I can ride all the way from Deep Run to Charleston quiet in my car.
Oh, wow.
I think that's probably surprising.
I like that.
There's a lot bing bong boom up here.
A lot of voices.
It's not really quiet.
Right. I always say my head is a bad neighborhood. You shouldn't go there alone.
Yes.
What is the thing you're most afraid of?
Letting people down.
I'm afraid of failing at a very deep level. I'm like every day.
I fail a lot.
I do too. I mean, like catastrophic failure.
Yeah.
I fail all the time, every day almost.
I think that's one of the things people like about me is that I was willing to fail on camera and get up and then they watch me keep going.
Right.
And I think that failure is, I learned so much more from failing than I do from winning. In fact, I feel like, the show made me so successful and so confident in myself that it ultimately led to a number of failures.
Right.
Which have been productive for me in looking, more deeply at who I am and what I want and what my strengths and weaknesses are.
I love that. 2 more questions and I'll leave you to your day. How do you define success? What are the little moments? I know that there's probably not, this hill that you imagine someday you'll climb and it'll all be good. But what are those little moments along the road that feel like, okay, I'm headed in the right direction?
I think when I connect with people, when I connect with my team, when the people that I'm working with around me, when we all are jiving and it feels good and everybody feels good about what we're doing, that feels like the most success. I always thought, I'm very much like I set a goal and then I try to achieve that goal. So I set a goal a long time ago. When I was living in New York, I wanted to write for the New York Times. I never let go of that goal. 3 years ago, I wrote an op-ed for the New York Times.
Yes, you did.
And I was I set out to do that. And then it was like, I should be celebrating. I should just feel like I have arrived.
Right.
And then it felt so hollow. It's like, okay, now what do I do?
Now what?
Yeah.
So you're a mom. You think
Yeah.
your kids will ever follow your path into hospitality? I've been having this conversation with a lot of my peers lately about their kids.
I always said no. My son has recently taken a very interesting interest in the kitchen. But he doesn't want me to participate at all. Like last week, he made oxtails for dinner. We were at a grocery store and I was like, why don't you pick out something we can make together? And he gets oxtails. I was like, okay.
Wow.
and so we're in the car and I was like, let's make the oxtails tonight. He's like, I don't want you to help. And I was like, well, you're going to need some help.
Right.
And he's like, I don't want you to help. And so he allowed me to stand on the other side of the kitchen island and talk him through it.
How old is he?
13.
Wow. Okay.
But, he wanted a panini machine for Christmas. So he's inching into this, interest in the kitchen, but I think he's afraid that I'm just going to, I think he wants to experience it and develop and evolve a little bit on his own in there.
Wow.
Maybe I can be overbearing. I don't know.
I have a 13-year-old daughter, and her mother they're in it right now with each other. 14, she's 14, good Lord.
Well, my daughter's 13, and in her own words, this week she is ghosting me.
Yes, I've become really embarrassing lately. Like, super, like, don't drop me off in front of the school. I'll walk.
Oh, yeah.
And like 18 months ago, I was a superhero. It's hard. It's like, I'm a very emotional guy, and it's hard.
Oh, I mean, I sat in my room last night and cried because my daughter doesn't want to talk to me.
Yeah.
I'm like, she's 13 years old. You have to put yourself back to what you were doing when you were 13. And what I know was different was my mom was not concerned about how I felt about her.
Oh, yeah. No. Yeah. Oh, boy. They come back. That's what everybody
says.
That's what everybody's telling us right now.
I hope I can make it. I hope I can hold out.
Yeah, Shelby, like, I'm kind of like in the middle, which is not fun, but Shelby takes the brunt of it, and I can see it hurts.
Yeah, and there's something with mothers and their daughters, because my children are twins. And my son and I, we're fine. I mean, he doesn't want me to cook with him, but we can be together.
Yeah, right.
But there's something, with mothers and daughters. And my daughter, Flo, said, "Mom, it's not what you say, it's the way you say it." And I was like, exactly.
That's kind of like, I'll drive my daughter to school and I'll say, you really need to be a little more respectful and kind to your mom. She needs to be more respectful and kind to me. Yeah, bruh. I'm like, what is that?
I know.
Yeah. Good. So we're not alone.
No, I feel better already.
Yeah. I mean,
when I told you I was feeling tender when I walked in, it was because of my 13-year-old daughter.
Yeah,
I'm not alone.
No, you're not, Shelby. I mean, lots of tears. I mean, man, the last 12 months, it has just been like, oh my God, is this ever going to end? Last question. What are you looking forward to the most? Can be short-term, long-term, philosophical, tactile. What are you looking forward to the most right now?
Working in my yard.
Cool. Listen.
It's been maybe it's not been that cold of a winter, but I really feel like
it's been miserable here.
It's been miserable.
We've gotten snow. We've got things that have never happened here.
I have really learned that I have some of this like seasonal depression or whatever. I need to have some sunlight, and I love working in my yard. I love I'm not incredibly successful growing vegetables, but I try every year. It's kind of sad.
I do not have a green thumb. I can't. I have this vision of a field of heirloom tomatoes, and I've never been able to get there.
I have that vision too, but I keep trying.
Yeah, good for you. I've given up. I've given up. Well, Vivian, thank you. Good luck on the new restaurant in May.
Thank you.
If you're in the Outer Banks. Theodosia. It's not Dear Theodosia. Like the song is just perpetually
you can
playing.
say Dear Theodosia.
Dear Theodosia, opening at the Sanderling Resort. Thank you for coming. Have fun while you're here. And
thank you.
Get back to that yard pretty soon.
I will.
Awesome. Thank you so much. If you like what you heard, tell your friends. We're on all the major platforms. Thanks for joining us on Say Grace. Hey, want to give a big shout out to Stolen Food Lab for letting us record here. They are an event space, a cooking lab, a co-working space. You can book it out for your event. So go to stolenfoodlabs.com. Big ups for them. Thank you. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Say Grace, Food for Thought and Hospitality. We hope you join us next time as we continue to dive deeper into the inspirational stories about the transformative power of hospitality.